Welcome to the Red Sneaker Writers Podcast. News, interviews, and writing tips for people who are serious about having a writing career and want some practical knowledge to help them achieve it. Your host is the nationally best-selling author of more than 50 books, William Bernhardt.
Hello, sneakers, and welcome back to the podcast. We're broadcasting this time from a winter wonderland, and chances are you may be snowed in too, wherever you may be right now. How about you? Turning to my sound engineer, Jesse Ulrich. Jesse, are you staying warm?
I am staying warm. It is snowy and icy out there, which is something, as Oklahoma watchers and listeners will know, is not something Oklahoma is good at handling. So
Right.
we'll see how long this takes until my
Stay
neighborhood
inside.
street.
It's
yeah,
safer.
Stay inside and it's cold. It's not even like the fun, like in the 20s, like high 20s cold. It is cold out there.
Right. Of course, took my cat for a walk. He insisted, but we didn't go that long. It was pretty cold. Hey, I want to thank everybody for the great response I got to the first official announcement on the last podcast about WriterCon 2022. This latest iteration of our annual Writers Conference is designed for you, people who are serious about writing and becoming successful writers. The conference, of course, is in Oklahoma City over Labor Day weekend every year, which this year is September 2nd through 5th. But the sessions are recorded, so you can participate even if you don't come in person. At WriterCon, you'll have a chance to pitch leading agents and editors and consult with a wide variety of experts, meet some wonderful people. Our headliners this year include best-selling thriller writer Robert Dugoni and former U.S. Poet Laureate Billy Collins. So please check out our website, which Jesse's got up on the screen, writercon.com, writercon.com. That's WRITERCON.com. Jesse, you're coming to WriterCon, right?
I will be there.
Fantastic. And you're going to be kind of our, they used to call that a man on the street kind of interview. That sounds kind of sexist now, but
The person at a conference.
Yes,
person
right.
At a conference.
Letting the outside world know what's going on, right?
Yep.
Fantastic. Hey, my special guest today is Lara Elena Donnelly. I have enjoyed reading Lara's work for some time. Her trilogy is a science fiction trilogy she's written. I'm stuttering now because I didn't think to ask her whether it's pronounced Amberlough or Anderlough, but I'm sure she will clear that up for me later. But it is fantastic, and she's received nominations for the Lambda and the Locus and the Nebula Award, but she has got a new book which just came out on Tuesday as we're recording this. It's called Base Notes. It's breaking out in a huge way and getting rave reviews from people and publications everywhere. I am anxious to talk to her about this book and her writing, but first, the news. So on previous podcasts, we've talked about some of the year-end reports coming from one source or another, but we haven't talked to any that are coming from literary agents. And I know many of you listening have or would like to have an agent. So I thought we might talk just a minute about the Nla End of the Year stats, which Jesse's got up on the screen now. I'll put a link to it in the show notes for those of you listening to the audio podcast. For more than a decade now, Nla, which is the Nelson Literary Agency led by Kristen Nelson, has compiled its yearly stats, and I thought you might be interested in hearing some of these. You can see the top one right there. Number of queries read and responded to by this major agency, but one with only 4 agents working there. How many queries? 13,561. That's in 2021 alone. How many full manuscripts did they request from people? 430. That's kind of a drop off. Number of new clients Nla signed last year? 13. So you see what just happened there? We went from 13,000 queries to 13 people. getting agents, which is why, of course, it's difficult to get an agent. Now, of course, this is not the only agency out there, but the point is, it's tough to find somebody, and it always has been. And this is probably going to sound really opportunistic, but I just have to point out that this is the importance of writers' conferences like the one I just mentioned that I host, WriterCon. I can speak for my own conference this way. We don't just hire any agents. I travel enough that I know the who's who and who you want. I'd never invite anybody who I wouldn't be very happy to have for my own agent. There are some people out there going to conferences, but not really selling any books or really even taking any clients in many cases. And that's not who we invite to WriterCon. Obviously, you have a leg up when you can meet people in person, and it pays off. In fact, we saw people last year, more than 20 people I counted out were asked for full manuscripts during 2 days of pitching. I know of 6 people who obtained agents at the conference, much less in the aftermath afterwards. So our average is way above the MLA average. Okay, next story, which also has to do with year-end reports. And the burning question, did print book sales go up or down in 2021? Most of you have probably seen one version or another of the AAP report because it's gotten a lot of press. AAP is the Association of American Publishers. They've released their year-end figures, which show overall a 9% growth, but a significant growth in print books, and for that matter, digital audio. But they're saying ebook sales were down by 4.7%. And you may be thinking like me, how can that be? We all read about how ebook sales surged during the lockdown and people tried ebooks for the first time. Granted, major publishers try and push people the other direction by pricing ebooks sometimes higher than the hardcover edition, but still, does that sound right? Well, here's the second opinion, because in the same week, we got statistics from BPD BookScan. According to BookScan, overall print book sales declined, although there were some categories that showed increases, notably fiction, adult fiction, and particularly romance and fantasy and manga. Those were up, but overall, not so much for print books. So Jesse, who do we believe here?
I don't understand how we can't get an answer to, did we sell more books last year than the year before? I'm curious how the sort of subscription services count these
That could
things
be a
now.
factor.
If your ebook is in the whatever the Amazon Kindle thing is called now,
Right.
Does it get counted every time someone opens it? Is it only when they finish it? Is it, we need to come up with a definitive way to count some of this stuff because people's livelihood depends on it. It'd be nice to know which way it's going.
Well, an even larger problem than not counting Amazon's Kindle Unlimited books, of course, would be not counting Amazon at all, or counting the many books published by Amazon, because the AAP, the Association of American Publishers, is a consortium of traditional publishers. So the big 5 are there, and some other major print publishers are there, but Amazon is not. So the one retailer that sells, not only publishes, but also sells more than 50% of all books sold in the United States is not mentioned, which might conceivably skew the statistics, not to mention the numbers on ebooks. Obviously, if print publishers are, like I said, pricing the ebook higher than the hardcover, their ebook sales are going to decrease. But I can tell you, just from looking at my own royalty statements, ebook sales are not decreasing. Are you still reading ebooks?
Yeah. I once tried to. I own a Kindle, and I once tried to buy an ebook not on Amazon, and that was a mistake because it would not work with the Kindle. I'm hoping to one day soon switch to a Kobo reader to allow myself access to other online ebook stores.
Well, the truth is the industry has changed. Jackie Michard was talking about this last time. She's been around almost as long as I have in this business. And, I understand traditional publishers and bookstores want to stay alive. I hope they do. but this kind of weird pricing, statistical reporting is misleading people. And of course, that's why I bring it up, Red Sneaker Writers, because I know many of you are thinking about publishing or getting ready to publish for the first time, and you need to be able to make intelligent decisions about where you want to go with your career and not have sort of skewed statistics that suggest that there's only one path to publication, right? One of the nice things I think about the current world of publishing is that authors have so many more options than they did once upon a time. You know, there's more than one approach, and you have to figure out which one is right for you, which usually depends upon opportunities and what you're writing and what you want out of your writing career. All right, well, enough about that. I'm anxious to talk to our guest, right? Our guest today has a new book called Base Notes. That's a perfume world term. We'll get to that in a minute. It's selling spectacularly well, has fabulous reviews. She's a terrific author, Lara Elena Donnelly. Lara, are you with us?
Hello.
There you are. Fantastic.
Yes, hi.
Thank
Wow,
you so much.
I was looking at that author photo and I look so somber.
You have some very serious author photos, at least on Google. I was like, some serious photos.
I am glad to see you smiling and laughing in front of your garden. That's much, I like that picture much better. Okay, so let's get right to it. What is it? Amberlough or Amberlough, or how do you pronounce it?
I didn't anticipate this question at all when I titled the book. I don't know why. It's Amberlough, like dough, a mnemonic that I have because I published the book and learned of her existence, a YA author named Amber Lowe, whose Twitter handle is Amberlough. And we ended up connecting. I went to Germany. She lives in Germany. We got coffee together. And she said, people always ask her, is it Amber Lowe or Amber Luff? And she said, I always tell them it's low like dough. So it's Amber Lowe like dough.
All right, mystery solved.
Yes.
Lara, I have a traditional first question because many of our listeners are writers or thinking about writing or aspiring to write. So here's my question. If you were going to give writers out there one piece of advice, I'm sure by this point you have many, but if you had to narrow it down to one, what would it be?
Meet other writers, I think, is
Nice.
Probably the biggest, like, however you can. All of the other pieces of advice that I would go to, like, find your local critique group, like go to a workshop, go to a convention. It's all about meeting other writers because they're ultimately going to be your best readers. They're going to be your best toolkit when you have problems that you need to solve. If you have someone that you can text who you trust to talk about craft, to talk about your story, like, that's going to be worth more than any other piece of craft advice or professional advice that I could give.
That's a terrific answer. I don't think we've ever had that one before, but I love that and totally agree. Growing up where I did, I don't think, well, I know I didn't meet any actual published writers until I'd sold 3 books to Random House, and what a world that opened up. I mean, that's part of the reason I host these get-togethers, is because it is so powerful to be with your tribe. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I was really lucky because I got to attend a writing workshop as a teenager, the Alpha workshop for science fiction, fantasy, and horror writers. I went when I was 17, and I feel like if I hadn't gone then, it like accelerated my writing career by probably 10 years, honestly.
Yeah, I don't doubt it at all. All right, let's hear about this new book, Base Notes. Tell us about that.
Whoa,
Okay.
tell you about it.
Well, start with, what's it about?
It's about a perfumer, an indie perfumer in New York City named Vic Fowler, who is trying to keep a business afloat, which is hard enough on its own, let alone in New York City, one of the most expensive places you can try to do anything, and is failing. Vic just cannot keep this business out of the red. But luckily has a nifty little side hustle, as many millennials do. And this side hustle revolves around a special type of perfume that Vic has perfected, which allows the wearer to relive any memory that they choose. The catch is, and when I say relive, I mean they get like sunk into it, like it is virtual reality, like they're reliving it. The catch is whoever else is present in that memory has to be used as an ingredient in the perfume. So Vic is effectively doing murder for hire. It's just that the murder is not the important part. The important part is turning the dead body into ingredients for perfume. So Vic is kind of an assassin, kind of a serial killer, and also a perfumer. More seriously, a perfumer than a serial killer or an assassin. That's just like that's a nights and weekends kind of gig.
That is a terrific premise. I can see why you are selling books. Hey, I can see that there are people watching this live stream. So let me just say, if any of you have any questions you'd like to ask Lara, just type it into the chat box and we'll make sure that she does. All right. What is the, I alluded before that the term base notes has some meaning. What's it mean in this perfume world?
So in perfume, base notes are the very bottom, like the foundation of a perfume. You have your top notes, you have your heart notes or your middle notes, and then you have your base notes. And usually, or in many cases, the base notes are sort of like darker, sometimes grungier, more bodily smell. They're like the heavier, longer lasting scents. So when you think of things like musk or civet or ambergris or like heavier smells tend to be these like the foundation of a perfume. And in the novel, the base notes of these special memory perfumes that Vic is creating tend to be the people. But also when I was trying to come up with a title, base notes felt like it struck the right chord because it's about, like the book is about people who will do anything to get what they want or what they need, or who are driven by circumstance to like the extremity of action. And base notes felt like a reference to like the baser human urges, like that desire for more or the like drive for survival. So it's kind of a play on words as well as a perfuming term.
I'm with you. I should probably point out for the audio crowd that when we're saying base, it's BASE.
Yeah, it's not
the potential double meaning. So this is a terrific, so original idea. Where'd the idea come from?
It's sort of a mixed bag, as I think many novel ideas are. Way back in the mists of time, by which I mean probably 2014, maybe early 2015, I read this article in The Guardian called My Search for the Great American Perfume by Jude Doyle. Now I'm like, is that what it was called? I'm 95% sure that's what it was called.
Close enough.
And it was basically the premise of the article was that there is not yet, or has not been until recently, a perfume or a perfume house in America that is willing to get as dirty as European perfume producers. So there hasn't been someone in America who's willing to do like that sort of funky bodily, like civet, musk, sweat, it smells like unwashed hair kind of scent, which the article posits is like what makes a lot of our favorite perfumes successful. But like many American perfumes, like, oh, Americans don't want to smell like sweat or sex. They want to smell like orange blossoms or laundry detergent. And then I had a couple of months later, I had been asked to submit a story for an anthology themed around the color orange. And I was like, what am I going to do? And I remembered this article, which had gotten me really into perfume. Like I had read it and like, ooh, I should start wearing perfume. This is so fascinating. And I thought of the orange blossoms and this idea that there was no like dirty American perfume. So I wrote this short story called The Dirty American, which I wrote literally the first week that I had moved to New York City. I wrote this story, which takes place in New York and is about a Midwestern transplant to New York. And so I was sort of working through my feelings about having moved and my like experience of the city that first week that I was there. And I wrote this short story. It was printed in the anthology. It was reprinted in Nightmare magazine. It's still online if you want to go and find it and read it. It's a prequel to the novel, so there are no spoilers or anything.
Cool. Hey, Jesse, see if you can find a link for that. We'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah. So
anyway, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, it's fine. Please link away. It was reprinted there, and then I got distracted because my debut novel came out, and then I was contracted to write 2 sequels to the debut novel, and I was very busy for several years. Right. And then once I had finished Amnesty, which is the 3rd novel in the Amberlough Dossier trilogy, my agent was like, well, what are you going to work on now? And I had a bunch of ideas, and the least well-formed of all of these ideas, the one that I was like, I have a vague idea, I could tell you kind of what it's about, here's like a 1-sentence pitch, was that I had been thinking, because I'd been living in New York for, a few more years. I was a little more acclimated. I had some more opinions about what it was like to be a broke artist living in the city. I was like, I think I could turn this short story into a novel if that would be interesting. And of course, the idea that I had the least idea how to turn into a book was the one that my agent and my editor were like, yeah, absolutely, you should do that one. So I turned it into a book.
That's the one that worked. Fantastic. And Jesse has, of course, found the link, and there it is. And I'll put it in the show notes for the audio podcast. Hey, we've got a question from Linda who wants to know about the research you did for this book. I'm guessing you had to do a lot of research about perfume and whatnot. What surprised you the most about that? Tell us about the research, and then tell us what surprised you most.
Oh man. Okay. So I did so much research, and I've just realized I really need to have like a written list of all of the things that I read, because I keep blanking whenever people ask me on like live stream podcasts, sort of things where I have to talk. I immediately forget.
It doesn't have to be encyclopedic, just pick and choose.
So what was actually very helpful was reading a lot of weird internet forums by hobbyists, because Vic does a lot of work at home and a lot of work in a lab, but I have never made perfume. So reading people's experience of like, well, I wanted to make a tincture at home, or like, is it safe to use a still inside? Reading people's experiences with trying to do this stuff at home was really useful. Yeah. I also was so lucky to be able to talk with some indie perfumers in person. Especially I was able to talk to Chris Rusak of Chris Rusak and Carter Weeks Maddox of Chronotope. We were both really, really helpful and very generous with their time and their advice. And also, Daniel, I can't remember his last name. Daniel from Dandy Perfume was also really kind and willing to answer questions. I also read a bunch of just very widespread books. I read some academic papers, like there was a great academic paper about queer identities and the concept of skank in perfume. And there was one about the sort of historical failure to taxonomize ambergris. Like, what is it? We don't know. So we'll put it in lists of things that we also don't know what they are. But I also read like some really great books, like The Emperor of Scent, which is a sort of not exactly a biography, but it's a story about Luca Turin, who's this sort of polymath / perfumer who had a theory about how the human nose and brain interprets scent, like how we are able to do this physically and chemically. Just all kinds of stuff, really. And I think it's tricky when you try to break down research, because like it's never really clear what you've read that actually becomes useful. I think you just fill your brain with stuff and then it comes out.
I get that. So was there anything in particular that surprised you in the research?
Yes. So the thing that surprised me the most is when I was learning about like the culture of the perfume world. I didn't know that there is this type of person who's very into perfume called a frag bro. And sadly, no frag bros made their way into base notes, but it is basically like a man, a very macho guy who's really into perfume, and sort of approaches it the way that you might expect men to approach like high-end watches or like their favorite football team. It's like a very masculine energy directed at this not perhaps traditionally masculine pastime in a way that is a little bit off-putting, and one might say like sort of toxic masculinity-ish. It's very weird. Highly encourage you to Google.
A frag bro. Okay, you didn't put it in your book. I'm putting it in mine. So that's fantastic. Haven't heard that either. Hey, KJ is asking if you have read The Secret Keeper by Erica, looks like Bauermeister, 2020. Apparently it too is about perfume. Ring any bells?
I haven't. No, I've never even heard of it, but I'm definitely going to put it on my library request list, which is 10 miles long.
Right.
I just have to say, the one definition of frag bro I could find on the internet is actually from Reddit, and the subreddit is called Fragrance Jerks. So, just thought I would share that because that's pretty funny.
That's pretty much what she said. I think
apparently there's a YouTube video that goes into more, more information about, but I feel like that covers it.
If you want to go on a weird YouTube spiral, yeah.
Yes.
That's right. Hey, James is asking, who are your favorite authors?
Oh, man.
I know.
feel like
Take a minute. Again, doesn't have to be encyclopedic. You didn't know we were going to asking these tough, Washington Post type questions, right?
Yeah, these are like the heavy hitting questions. Gosh. Well, I really like John le Carré. I have like not every single one of them, but I have a lot of them. I like Highsmith a lot, Patricia Highsmith.
Yeah.
Oh no. I'm like, have I ever read a book in my life?
Well, think about who are people who are, alive and in the prime of their careers. Whose books do you really get excited when you see a new one has come out or something?
Oh, well, we're due for a new Donna Tartt novel. It's been about 10 years since The Goldfinch came out. So
wow, I guess you're right. Yeah.
And also Hilary Mantel. Mm-hmm. Basically, I like books about people trying to maneuver their way through difficult socio-political and social situations.
Mm-hmm.
I just finished reading Holly Black's The Cruel Prince, which I know is like several years. I'm several years late on that one, but similarly, definitely about maneuvering through difficult socio-political situations.
Oh, this afternoon when I opened up my Kindle and punched the library button, it told me for the first time that I had more than 1,000 books there. And I thought, okay, give it up, delete some. It's not happening. So, I mean, some have been read, but maybe not all.
Oh, you know who else? Fonda Lee. I really like Fonda Lee as well. Probably in like 15 minutes, I'll be like, and I just remembered like 10 other authors I really like.
Are you saying, I don't think I know this name. Are you saying Vonda or Fonda or?
Fonda with an F.
Okay.
She wrote the Greenbone Saga, which is a sort of like, it's set in a fantasy world, but it's very 1930s sort of like Hong Kong gangster, like, it's a bit like Godfather-y. There are like gang wars going on, and there are people who have magic that's fueled by wearing jade jewelry. But if you don't have the right skill set, if you're not from the right kind of family, the jade will drive you insane. So there's a lot going on, and they're very addictive. Like once you get started, you're like, I must finish.
That sounds great.
Yeah.
Well, getting back to base notes for just a second, Vic Fowler, the character you mentioned, does not easily fit into easily characterized gender norms. he's not referred to by the traditional personal pronouns. What's going on there? And I mean, this is a thing I think many writers have struggled with in recent years. What was your approach to this?
I think it's very funny that in phrasing this question, you said, Vic Fowler, he doesn't fit into traditional.
I was trying so hard.
No, it's totally
right here.
It's very interesting to me to see when people realize, and sometimes they don't realize, right?
Mhm.
They'll read the whole book and then they'll use a pronoun for Vic. And I've seen people using any number of different ones. And then if I get the chance to talk to them, I'll at some point in the conversation be like, so I'm just curious, where did you get that pronoun? And then they inevitably completely lose their minds.
Right. Well, it's anyway, go ahead. It's complicated.
So the way that it unfolded thusly is that when I was working on the short story, at the time I had only really written, not only, but I tended to write in third person. And I had started this story in first person. And I got maybe like 500 or 1,000 words in, and I realized that I had never given a pronoun to the narrator. No one had addressed the narrator using a pronoun. And I thought,
and you're writing in third person. How is that?
No, in first person. In first person.
Okay.
Like this story, I was not used to writing in first person. So it surprised me to figure out that when you're writing in first person, you don't have to pronoun your narrator.
No, I. Sure.
Yeah, exactly. That's the only one that you're using. And I got kind of into the story and was like, oh, I hadn't thought of that, but it's true. You don't have to. And I thought, I wonder if I could do this for the whole story. And I could. And so I never mentioned it to any of the editors, and people would read it. And then I would get to have this joyful moment of pointing it out. And I was like, this could become addictive. And so I wondered if I could do it for a whole book. And it turned out that I could. But I also don't want to say, like, the book is definitely playing. Like, it's playing a game with the reader. It's also like me playing a game with the reader so that later I get to go, haha. And it is a part of the formal conceit of the novel, which when you get through all the way to the end, it's sort of revealed that there's a structure to the book, which, given that the narrator hasn't been pronounced, could theoretically play into the formal conceit. But also, a careful reader may notice like moments where the text sort of refers to or brushes up against Vic's gender identity. But I think Vic is it's not something that Vic is interested in talking to the reader about. And since Vic is the narrator, you're only going to get what Vic wants to tell you. And if Vic doesn't want to tell you something, you're not going to get it. So I think you have to sort of read in between the lines or not. Like, if you choose not to read in between the lines, that's also your reading experience. But it was a really interesting thing to kind of grapple with while writing the book. And it has been very interesting to see people leaving reviews with all kinds of pronouns on them.
Right.
I've got some like she, her, some he, him, some they, them. People are all over the map.
To be fair, maybe it's just people my age, but we normally think of the name Vic, as being male. Vic Maro or Victor Mature or Victor Buono, or I suppose it could be short for Victoria, or as you're saying, it might not be a traditional gender assignment at all. Did you think about using a name that's a little bit more, not traditionally assigned one way or the other?
I thought about it a bit, but I was like, I really don't want to name this character Alex. Vic just didn't feel like an Alex, or whatever. And I was trying to come up with something, and oh my God, I don't know if she'll kill me for this if she ever reads the book, but my partner's mother goes by Vic. Her name is Veronica. And I was like, oh, because I also am a big fan of the movie Victor Victoria. Yeah. And so I was like, well, Vic, but who's named Victoria these days? But like, it could be Victor, it could be Victoria, it could be Veronica, it could be a name that Vic chose out of thin air.
If there were somebody named Veronica these days, I could see her going by Vic. So you're right.
Yeah. And Vic's landlady uses Vicky also at one point as like a pet name, which I think is interesting that very few people like pick out as being like, what? Would you call a Victor Vicky? You know, like, have you ever called someone whose name is Victor Vicky as a nickname?
Sure. I am so impressed that you were able to bring this off for a whole novel. I have sometimes written chapters where I didn't want to reveal any kind of gender information, not because I didn't want to, assign the character a traditional gender identity, but because it's a bad guy viewpoint. And I don't want to narrow the field by saying, anyway, it's either a guy or a girl or neither or whatever. And I just find that incredibly difficult. Of course, I'm writing in third person usually too. So anyway.
Yeah, I don't imagine it would be very easy to do it in third person. You'd have to get very creative with your syntax.
Well, hats off to you in any case. Last time on the podcast, our guest was Jacqueline Mitchard, and we had a nice chat with her about the challenge of writing unsympathetic characters. You also have characters in this book who like commit criminal acts and engage in other extreme behaviors. Were you concerned that readers might not empathize with the characters and get involved in the book, the story?
No.
Good for
you. Mostly probably because I read a lot of books with horrible people. You were like, what books do you like? And I said, I like Highsmith. Tom Ripley is not really but also here's the thing. I think it's a big difference.
He is though. I mean, yeah, he's not flawless, but you couldn't have written several books about a character readers didn't like at some level, even if you just.
I feel like if you think about it, it's the difference between sympathy and empathy, right? Yes. Mm-hmm. We can feel for Tom Ripley. Like, I wouldn't necessarily be like, oh, poor Tom Ripley, right? No, not poor Tom Ripley.
But you like seeing him in action.
Yeah, when you read the books, because they're so close to him and you see him having all of these, like, he's so anxious, he's so afraid he's going to get caught, but he wants these things so badly. And it's so compelling when read from this very close third person that you feel like, yeah, I completely understand where this guy is coming from, which is not sympathy, it's empathy. And I think people kind of, we talk about like, oh, this book didn't have a sympathetic main character. And it's like, it doesn't matter. Did it have an empathy? Like, did you empathize with the main character enough to understand, why they were doing what they're doing? Were their motivations, did their motivations make sense to you? And did you find the motivations compelling, at least within the scope of the novel?
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. This book is also concerned, or at least I think it's concerned with art and artists and the act of creation art. We're always told that you're supposed to make sacrifices for your art. I heard that early on, so I decided, well, I'll sacrifice exercise because I hate it. So that's not really. But the characters in your book take this sacrifice business to kind of an extreme. Where did this inspiration come from? Were you trying to say something here or what?
Yeah, I feel like this is a very angry book. There's a lot of anger, I think, in the air these days.
Yeah, but not at all unpleasant or, like you've sat there listening to people shout at each other for 10 hours or whatever. But, go ahead. So it's an angry book, you say.
It's angry. It's angry in its marrow. It's not like you're going to open it and someone is just like shouting a polemic at you. I've been thinking about it because a lot of people have asked this question, like about the book and how it deals with art and sacrificing for your art. And I think that Vic, the main character and serial killer, is sort of a metaphor about sacrificing for your art. Like, none of us are out, I hope none of us are out here murdering people to try to get by and like have enough income to pursue our passions. So like Vic is kind of the metaphor about being willing to do anything to pursue your passion. But I think Jane, who is the love interest, Jane is much more like the reality of sacrifice. And she hasn't sacrificed for her art. She has sacrificed her art to get by. Like, she used to be a photographer and she gave it up. And now she's working as a bartender to put herself through like a 2-year program to become a radiology tech, because she's just gotten to a point where she's like, it's not worth it. The sacrifices I made for my art were not worth it. The art never paid off for me. And the reason the art never paid off for me is not because I was not a good artist. It's because the deck was stacked against me. I didn't have generational wealth. I didn't want to do the whole networking, butt kissing, like schmoozing stuff. I just wanted my art to speak for itself. And when it didn't, I became disillusioned and I just decided to give it up and go to technical school. And so I think like if Vic is the metaphor of like the artist sacrificing everything and like, you know, cutting throats and burning it all down to pursue this one pure passion, like Jane is sort of the reality of what I think people really feel and do, or are more likely to feel and do than, and Vic is kind of the wish fulfillment. I mean, I don't really wish to be going out there and murdering people, but you know, there's something so satisfying. I think that's probably what draws Jane to Vic, is like, oh, Vic made the opposite choice, and there's something in her that wants it, right?
Fabulous. What's your writing process look like? Do you write every day? Do you get up early, or are you a night owl, or how's it go for you?
Right now, my writing process looks like lying face down on the floor because I'm in that sort of weird no man's land between projects.
You just had a new book come out.
I did. But, you know, because publishing is on such a weird timeline, like the book was done months ago.
Right.
And so now I'm like, I feel like I should be doing something. But what I'm doing is doing book promo for the book that I finished months ago. But when I have like an active project, especially when I'm on deadline, I tend to write at the same time every day, which is usually 8 p.m. till around 11. I'll like finish up my day job because I have a day job because I made sacrifices. And I like health insurance. So I'll finish up my day job. Sometimes I will cook dinner. My wonderful partner is cooking dinner tonight. So thank you, Elliot.
Sweet.
Sometimes I will make dinner. Sometimes he'll make dinner while I do something completely non-writing related. But I feel like it's important to have a little bit of a break between day job and night job. And then I'll write from like 8 to 11. Sometimes I'll work on the weekends. I haven't been working on the weekends lately because, as I said, I am in a slump. But I'm sure as soon as I hear back from my agent about my next couple of chapters that I sent her, and she's like, if she's like, yes, these are great, keep going. When will you have it done? Then I'll have to set myself a deadline and actually ever finish it.
I bet that's what you hear. Not in a slump. You're just living in the moment. And the moment now is that you've got a new big book from a major publisher. So enjoy it, right?
Yeah, I'm trying to rest on my laurels briefly, except you know that's not possible. Like, I feel that. Do you have the thing where you like when you sit down and you're like, now I'm going to relax, and your brain just goes like, come on, you're supposed to be producing. Come on, produce something.
But what I've learned over the years is that's actually a plus when, you know, I sit down and think I'm going to watch television, but actually start thinking about the pages I wrote that day. Pretty soon, subconscious will tell me, oh, but you forgot to, and then I'll make a note and do it the next day. So that's not necessarily a bad thing.
Yeah, it's shower brain. I feel like whenever I get in the shower, which is the time when you literally can't do anything else. You're just in the shower, you're wet, like you're covered in soap, and your brain is like, oh, a great idea for a story.
Yes. Yeah. Except in the shower, you can't even make a note. You just got to remember, at least for 5
but you
minutes.
can. My mom gave me this amazing thing that is a waterproof notepad with a little wax pencil, and it sticks on the tile with a like sticky pad. And so when you have an idea in the shower.
Do they have those at Amazon? I want one.
Wherever sticky notepads are sold.
That's better than writing it in the steam on the shower door or something, because that's just not going to last.
You could also, if your phone is in the bathroom, just like dictate to Google and Siri to remind you about something.
How could your
you
phone
get back
be
later and you're like
in the bathroom, not in the shower. But
okay. You just shout loud.
Yeah.
Okay.
Listen, there's a lot of me yelling at Google in this house, so because it just talks to me sometimes, and it's terrifying.
So, Lara,
wait, if I said, Alexa, turn off Jesse's lights.
See, I changed my word because I wanted to be all Star Trek-y, so it's computer, but I have it muted, so no, you can't control my Alexa.
That would have been so fun.
I know.
Lara, pantser or planner?
Planner, definitely a planner.
The outline. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but I mean, no plan survives the enemy, so. There's a beautiful plan at the beginning, and then things happen.
Right. Oh, yeah. You may change it every day, but you've still got the plan, right?
Yeah. And I actually don't even really understand how people can, people are like, turn off your internet so that you don't get distracted while you're writing. And if you need to research something, just put brackets that say like research later and come back to it. I'm like, but what if that piece of research is like key to something later? I want everything as I'm going to be about as finalized as I can get it, so that I don't ever get into the situation where I don't have something that I need because I haven't written it yet. Like, I want to know everything that came before so that I'm building my little, it's more like dominoes, right? I'm putting my little dominoes in the right order.
Right.
I don't want to leave out like a huge chunk of dominoes because I was like, I'll do that in the second draft. Like, no.
Right. How do you develop your characters? Do you have a process? Does that come out in the first draft, or do you think about it in advance? You don't have to name any names, but do they spring from people you know? What's your process there?
My characters are almost always sort of where the story comes from.
Right.
I don't want to say they're always the first thing that I think of. They're not always like the germ of the idea, but I have a really hard time even moving on a story if I don't know who it's about or who's making it happen. And they tend to sort of live in my head in a way where, like, when I'm going around the world experiencing it as myself, I'm also kind of experiencing it as my characters, which is really useful when you're like, well, what do what do they think about this situation? What do they think about that situation? And because, they've been beside you that whole time, experiencing the world with you and having their own opinions about it. Which sounds a little bit creepy, but
no, not creepy. No.
Well, I mean, there are a whole bunch of other people living in my head with me.
That's being a writer, though, isn't it? That's who you're talking to in the shower.
Yeah. I never shower alone.
That should be.
Yeah, that sounds creepy.
No, I was saying that should be the tagline to sell our next book.
Oh, yeah.
Whatever.
Yeah.
Never shower alone.
I will let Linda ask the last question. She wants to know, you touched on this a little bit, but what are you working on next?
So there's nothing set in stone. I have not signed any contracts. But like I said, I have sent some chapters to my agent for the next book to see what she thinks of them. I don't know if any of your listeners or you guys are familiar with the old Scottish ballad Tam Lin, which is about, I'm seeing quirked eyebrows. So it is about
that kind of rings a bell, but go ahead.
Bold young lady named Janet encounters a handsome knight in the forest and falls deeply in love with him, and does what happens when you fall deeply in love with someone, gets pregnant. This is a problem because it's old-timey Scotland, and her dad is like, where's the father of your child? And she's like, well, the problem is that he was kidnapped by the fairies, and they're going to sacrifice him to Satan because they have a deal with the devil. And every 7 years they have to sacrifice somebody. And this year it's going to be the guy who got me pregnant. You know, so that's a problem. And she has to go and rescue him from the fairies, which she does by holding him fast while he turns into various things like a bear and a snake and a burning brand. But she wins, and she gets to take him home. So my next book is only very vaguely a retelling of this Scottish ballad.
Well, it's a pretty good story. But
yeah, it is a pretty good story. It's set in contemporary New York. The Fairy Court is a multinational media consulting firm. You know, your average toxic job that is willing to sacrifice its workers to Satan, or, you know, capitalism. And our hero Sophie has to save her best friend Chris from that horrible fate.
Well, you need to come back when that one comes out, all right?
I would love nothing
I want to talk
more.
about the Fairy Court and whatnot. We need, for that matter, we need to get you out to WriterCon sometime.
I've never been to Oklahoma City. I would love to visit. I know.
Is it that surprising that someone from New York has not been to Oklahoma City? It's not that surprising.
I'm from Ohio. I'm not from New York. I'm from Ohio.
Yeah, from the other O state. So
the other O state.
I think that would be great. Lara, thanks so much for being on the podcast.
Thank you for having me. This was delightful.
I agree.
I had a great time.
Bye-bye. All right, everyone. Like I said, the annual Writers Conference, WriterCon, has it's posted its updated webpage on our cool new site, writercon.com. We got authors and agents and editors and book marketers and author assistants. We'll have over 70 sessions and many chances for you to do exactly what Lara just told us was the most important thing for writers: meeting other writers, networking, and getting the connections and knowledge that you need to build your writing career. And right now, you can take advantage of the early bird prices, which won't be there forever. So please visit the website and think about registering for this year's conference. Until next time, hey, keep writing, sneakers. And remember, you cannot fail if you refuse to quit. See you next time.